Text by Hinton, Chapter 2, Part 1. I sat down at the kitchen table, sore and dazed and half surprised that the world seemed to be rolling along as usual. Mason came into the kitchen with a bottle of iodine. I looked away while he dabbed some on the cut above my left eye and on the raw knot on my forehead. I couldn't think of anything to say to him. Then he laid the back of his hand on my forehead and said, "You're running a little bit of a fever. You want to stay home from school today?" "All right," I said. Then I said, "I'll tell everybody I was sleepwalking and fell down the back steps." I still wouldn't look at him, but after a second he reached out and patted me on the head like a puppy. I knew we were made up, but things weren't the same. I knew in the back of my mind that Mason had changed a lot during the last couple of years. But now it seemed like I really didn't even know him too well anymore. He used to laugh more and yell less, and while he always had been a reserved kind of guy, at least he used to talk to me like I was another human person. Nowadays, he was constantly surprising me. I couldn't tell how he was going to act, what he was going to do next. Like a couple of days later, he announced he wasn't going to the fair. I was as shocked as if he'd said he was going to skip Christmas. How come? I was sitting in the kitchen, riding a chair backward, watching him make the weekly batch of chili. Mason was really good at chili making. A funny thing though, when people tried asking him for the recipe, he never could remember how he did it. I'd watched him a dozen times before, and he never did make it the same way twice. Why should I go? It'll just be the same as last year and the year before that. Rides and crummy sideshows and gyp games and livestock shows. His voice trailed off. Anytime the conversation got near horses, a funny kind of uneasy silence would drop on us like a cloud promising thunder. Since the fight, both of us had to work at it to sound like we were carrying on a normal conversation. But now he was thinking the same thing I was. Last year, I'd entered Negrito in some of the Western classes at the fair and won 3 ribbons, one of them a first place. And Mr. Kincaid of Kincaid Quarter Horse Ranch came up to me after and said, "You've done a lot with this little horse, kid. You've done a real good job." Mr. Kincaid is the kind of guy who doesn't go around talking to a lot of people. Thinking about Negrito made my stomach lurch like I had dropped off a cliff. "Anyhow," Mason continued quickly, "it's a waste of money. I didn't like it last year." "You've been to the fair every year of your life," I said. "So I ought to know what I'm missing, right? I just outgrew it, Tex. That's all there is to it." He tasted the chili, then added some more peppers. Mason's chili was good and strong. "Well, I ain't, and I'm going," I said. He didn't say anything. "I ain't going to outgrow it either. I'll think the fair is fun no matter how old I get." "That," Mason said, "is quite likely." I breathed a little easier. At least he wasn't going to try to keep me from going. "Can I take the pickup?" I asked finally. "Nope, no way. Last time you drove it by yourself, you got in that drag race that almost killed you. You wouldn't last 10 minutes in the city. Anyway, you don't have a license." That was pretty corny. We both started driving when we were 12 years old, but he never had let me drive in the city by myself. "I bet Bob will drive me and Johnny," I said. "Probably. Bob doesn't have the sense God gave a goat. Here's $3. That's all you're going to get, so don't ask for any more." I was surprised to get that much. Mason didn't part with money easy. If Pop had been here, he probably would have given us $10 apiece. "I wish Pop would come home," I said. Mason looked hacked off. Just mentioning Pop got him irritated lately. You'd think since he was Pop's favorite kid, he'd be a little easier on him. I known Pop like Mason better ever since I can remember. It was a little hard to figure, since I was the one who acted like him, who wanted to be like him. Pop and Mason weren't anything alike. Pop never took anything too serious. Even that time I got into law trouble, he got over it quicker than I thought he would. Pop was a lot of fun. Mason was exactly Mr. Chuckles. "Maybe he ain't coming back," Mason said. Mason wasn't exactly Mr. Chuckles. Maybe he ain't coming back, Mason said. It seemed like my heart stopped beating for a second, then started off at a gallop. What makes you say that? Well, he's never been gone this long before. He's not making any money rodeoing anymore. It's just an excuse to go roaming around with the other good old boys. I figure one of these days we're going to slip his mind completely. You're nuts, I burst out desperately. He's coming back. You're crazy to talk like that. Maybe so, Mason said, but he didn't sound like he meant it. Is your hair wet? He asked suddenly. Yeah, I just washed it. Again? You washed it yesterday. Yeah, well, Jamie said it looked better when I wash it every day. Jamie gonna pay the hospital bills when you come down with pneumonia? There was a funny kind of quiet. Our mother had died of pneumonia. It was a long time ago. I bet Pop's home by Thanksgiving, I said. Mason said, You're on. Sunday was the first day of the fair, and Bob Collins drove us into the city for it. He had a date with him, so me and Johnny had to swear to sit in the back seat and not move and not talk and only breathe enough to keep us alive. Bob had driven us places before. We lived about 20 miles from the city. That was good in a way, since it was close enough to get to when you got really bored with the small town, and you probably knew what was going on more than somebody in a small town who was 100 miles away from a city. But it was bad, too, since as soon as you said you were from Garyville, the city kids thought you were a hick. Almost all the kids in our town wore long hair and old jeans and smoked grass and got drunk, just like the city kids. But somehow everybody thought it was more cool when the city kids did that stuff, especially the city kids. Me, I like living in the country, and some of the other kids liked it too. Some of them pretended they did because they couldn't live anywhere else. Then you had the people like Mason, who were itching to get out. I couldn't quite figure out why. Me and Johnny kept our word and didn't pester Bob a bit on the way to the fair, in case he decided to turn around and take us back. We had several things planned for the way home, when he couldn't do much about it. We did clown around a little bit, but I doubt that he heard us. His girlfriend talked a mile a minute. Bob dropped us off in front of the north entrance to the fairgrounds and told us to meet him there at 10 o'clock. Then he drove on to the movies or wherever he was going. It cost $1 just to get into the fair, which was a good inspiration for trying to figure out a way to sneak in. I'd managed it the year before, and me and Johnny walked up and down the fences for about half an hour looking for a safe spot to crawl over. Maybe a lot of people had managed it the year before, because this year there were too many cops and guards to even try it. Shoot, I said, as we forked over the $1 at the entrance. That leaves me $2. I'll get about 2 rides out of that. Don't worry about it, Johnny said. I'm loaded. Johnny never tried to brag about having money. He got $5 a week allowance and could usually get some more from either Bob or Jamie, and he'd been saving up for the fair for a long time. He was real generous, not to show off or anything. It was just that money was something to have a good time with, and if you were his buddy, he wanted you to have a good time too. I like that attitude. I never felt bad about letting him pay for anything if I didn't happen to have any money. Mason, man, he wouldn't let you give him the time of the day. I was sorry Mason was missing the fair this year, but I was glad to be there with Johnny. Whenever I went with Mason, he just about drove me nuts because he wanted to plan everything out. He'd walk up and down and look everything over and decide exactly which ride was the scariest and which game he could win at. Shooting baskets last year, he cleaned up on his stuffed animals, and where to buy the cheapest hot dog. We'd be there an hour before we really did anything. The only kind of plan I ever followed was going through the mile-long livestock barn first, so I could look at the different breeds of horses. But this year I didn't feel like looking at a lot of horses, so after we gawked at the cattle a while, I said, let's head on out to the Midway. Johnny said, sure, not asking a question. Johnny was smarter than most people thought. Once you get a reputation for being scatterbrained, people always think you never have a serious thought in your head. That isn't always true. I ought to know. We ran from ride to ride, just hitting the scary ones. Some were fast, and some flipped you upside down, and some whirled you around, and some did all three about 100 feet in the air. Between rides, we ate corn dogs and fried chicken, and ice cream and corn on the cob. When we weren't eating or riding, we played the games, trying to knock down bottles with baseballs or pitch nickels in a plate. I won a big red toy poodle rifle shooting. They always screw up the sights or something on those rifles, but after one round, I figured out how to compensate for it, and the rest is easy. I am a very good shot. I hunt ducks mostly. Johnny won a bear throwing darts. We felt silly carrying the animals around and gave them to some little kids. Then we watched the preview of the girly show, but you had to be 18 to go in. Johnny wanted to go through the freak show, so I stood around outside while he did. I'd been through the freak show before, and last year it depressed me for some reason. Me and Johnny got kicked off the double Ferris wheel, even though it was the highest ride at the fair, giving you a view of the whole city. After some of the other rides, it seemed a little tame. So we livened it up a little by rocking back and forth. We were on the top wheel trying to scare each other, forgetting neither one of us has the sense to be scared. We almost flipped the seat, but then some people down below noticed, and the operator brought us down in a hurry, yelling at us before we even came to a stop. He was a mean-looking carny, and we shot off before he got a chance to do much more than holler. "You kids want to kill yourself? Go jump off the madhouse." We ran behind a hot dog stand and leaned against it laughing. Well, I wondered who those two idiots were, and I might have guessed. I turned around. There was Jamie and some other girl. Jamie had on blue jeans and a blue sweater and a funny blue fair hat with a big feather in it. She looked really cute. "We were just having fun," Johnny said. "That's what it's for you, isn't it?" "You moron," Jamie said. Then she said, "This is Marcy. Her mother brought us." I seen her friend at school but hadn't paid much attention to her. Ninth graders don't mess around with seventh graders much. We started down the midway again, Johnny and Marcy walking together, me talking to Jamie. "You're almost looking human again," Jamie said. "I'm surprised at how many people believe that sleepwalking story you were giving out." "Well, I do sleepwalk," I said. "People always seem to find that fact more interesting than I do." "You didn't tell them anything different." Jamie shook her head. "Wouldn't do me any good if I did. Mr. Super Cool Mason can do no wrong, as long as we get to the state finals in basketball this year." Some of the couples we passed had their arms around each other, one with one hand in the other's back pocket. That looked like fun, but I didn't think Jamie would go for it. "You guys been to the fortune teller yet?" she asked. "Nah, we wouldn't waste money on junk like that," Johnny answered. "She really is good," Jamie said. "Come on, let's go. I want to hear what she tells you guys." We followed along. Jamie had a way of making you do what she said. Anyway, if the fortune teller was any good, maybe I could find out where Negrito was. We stopped outside the booth. "No way," Johnny said. "I'm not going to throw away a whole $1." "Well, hell, I'll pay for it." Jamie slung her purse off her shoulder. "Cole's going to cream you if he hears you cussing like that anymore." "He's not here to hear it, is he? Go on in." Johnny took the $1, winking at me. One of his favorite tricks was to see how much money he could worm out of his family. He was good at it, but then he wasn't related to Mason.